Am I on here? Testing, testing, testing. How's that? First, I'll just put up this nice photograph of my mother. Sorry, Mom. Living in Metta. We'll get to it. But you know, first I have to do the shirt. You know I'm going to do that, right? Here we go. Living in Metta, out on a limb. Kindness is an act of love. It's compassion in action, and it is an attitude. I've been enjoying this book that Bob read from called Force of Kindness by Sharon Salzberg. A longtime Buddhist, she says, when we are devoted to the development of kindness, it becomes a movement of the heart so deep and subtle. It's like a movement of the sea close to the ocean floor, all but hidden, yet affecting absolutely everything that happens above. That is the force of kindness. And she discusses metta, which is a Buddhist term which means loving kindness. And she invites us to discover the true power of metta within us, even if we're unsure that we've ever felt such a force. Living in metta. It's a powerful idea. The words love and kindness in our lives can have a lot of very weird stuff attached. Sharon said, when she was young and someone extended kindness to her, she felt kind of humiliated that her pain was visible somehow. And I remember feeling that way, like everyone could see inside of me and see that I was enough of a mess that I needed help. Weak, incapable. Kindness with some sort of condescension to my feelings of inadequacy. And I couldn't see it as an extension of love because I hadn't grown that container yet. And as an adult, whether or not I projected those old beliefs or whether I just attracted people who had similar beliefs, I don't know. But my son reminded me of a couple of times when he was growing up, when I had been kind and generous with some people, and then they found reasons to end the friendship rather abruptly. And I may have been less than perfect, but I thought not significant enough to just wash away the effort and generosity that I had extended when they really needed help. I felt like I'd gone out on a limb, and the limb had broken. And so I had to wonder, was I condescending? Did my acts of kindness make them feel belittled somehow? And if so, then how do we do kindness without pushing people away? Well, here's a clue. We do it clean. We do it naturally. We do it from the heart because it's the right thing to do. When we have children, we love them. We feed them nourishing food. We clean up their messes and hopefully teach them to clean up their own messes later on. We plan special events that we know they'll freak out over. And we wipe the hair off their brow when they're not feeling well, and we read their favorite stories over and over and over again, even though we would really rather go to bed. In short, we are practicing metta. Recently, as some of you know, our senior Great Pyrenees dog passed on. He was really, really old, and he'd been unwell for quite a while. And when he had trouble with stairs, we built him a ramp. And we encouraged him to walk for as long as he could because we knew that it would loosen him up and make him feel better. And we stopped doing that when we knew it was hurting him too much to get up. And we put little treats between his paws so he wouldn't have to get up to eat as often. And when we saw him walk off into the bush, we let him. We knew that he was going to find his place to pass on alone because that was his nature. That was metta. And now we have a little pup who's maybe the cutest puppy in the world. Maybe. And she seemed fine when we first got her, but it became apparent pretty quickly that she was really sick. There was something wrong with her, and we had numerous visits to the vet. We finally just figured out what it is. She's on the right medication, and all of a sudden she's turning into Super Pup, a regular bounding bundle of puppyhood. And we clean up after her and correct her when she misbehaves, and cuddle her when she whimpers sometimes at night, and play in the morning and take her for walks, and lots and lots and lots and lots of love, because that's all Metta. And somehow it seems easier with children and dogs, doesn't it?
Can I say one thing?
Yes, you may.
I had my first grandson was in kindergarten, and the teacher asked what he would like to be, and he came up with kindness.
That's pretty amazing. Don't children know stuff? I don't know if that was heard, but she's saying her grandson, when asked what he wanted to be, he said he wanted to be kindness. How wonderful is that? My experience is that it is easier with children and dogs because they have this naturalness to them, and when people grow up, we have this sort of adult expectations. Well, what'd they do that for? Well, it was probably their kid doing it inside, When I worked as a nurse in geriatrics, I learned that every single one of those seniors, even though sometimes they were cranky and they didn't want their medicine and they were bummed because they couldn't do things the way they used to and had to have people looking after them and all that stuff, but inside every one of those people was a little kid, the little kid that they had always been, that had never gone away. And if you could find that little kid and play with them, then A, you had a friend for life, and B, caring for them was much, much, much simpler. I'd dance with them in their wheelchairs and all kinds of things. And it was I just consider it one of the gifts that I was given as a caregiver, to suddenly have that awareness. Maybe that's what we need to do with all adults. Every time we think somebody's being a little grumpy, we just say in our heads, because they'll get really mad if you do it out loud, I wonder where the kid in there is and what they'd like to do. What game would they like to play today? Making the decision to live in Metta is not an easy path. It requires commitment, and it requires a devout belief in the power of kindness. And this path is made difficult by ingrained patterns of fear and jealousy, ours and other people's. People around us may devalue kindness. We might even do that ourselves. There are challenges, sometimes up close and personal, and sometimes really subtle. But as Sharon says in this book, if we can commit to the open-hearted exploration of kindness, it will reveal itself as a force that can change our lives. Growing up in my home, compassion was in evidence. My parents opened their home to young people who needed a safe place to live. They made sure there were extra presents under the tree in case somebody just randomly showed up at Christmas time. They gave what there was to be given, and they generally showed concern for any kind of suffering. But kindness kind of got muddled up with some version of niceness that wasn't really respected or highly regarded. Too much niceness suggested a pallid, sort of namby-pamby person, not really respected. Mom and apple pie. That was for the masses, not for the enlivened intellect. And in our home, intellect was ranked really high. But guess what? I had to learn as an adult that kindness outranks intellect. Period. I had some friends years ago, and the woman had a fetal alcohol syndrome, and she married a scientist. I always thought, wow, it's a really interesting pairing, because she really didn't have the mental capacity to keep up with him on the things that he liked to talk about. But what I learned was that she was the sweetest and kindest person I have ever met. It was unbelievable. Kindness outranks intellect. And if we don't do it naturally for some reason, if it isn't modeled for us when we're growing up, or if it isn't part of our experience, or whatever it is that we come to this show with, we have to cultivate it until it becomes a way of being. Kindness is the fuel that helps us walk the talk of love. It helps us care for each other and for ourselves. Loving ourselves points to capacities of compassion and understanding that are part of being alive. You know, I've been giving myself kind of a hard time recently because there was a couple of times I was in a big box store that shall remain nameless, and honestly, by the time I got out of there, I wasn't a nice person. I was thinking like really toxic thoughts, trying to find simple stuff in a world of plastic and garbage and full and lights and stuff and everything. Then I'm bumping into, trying to talk to staff members, and they're completely untrained and they have absolutely no idea where anything is, and they're not even nice about it. I don't know, find it yourself. I was like, really? And you're working here, why? And, then getting up to these heinous lineups, and there's carts just filled with plastic food and plastic stuff, and I'm like, wow, I can't deal with this. I got into the car, and honestly, I didn't feel like a very nice person. I was like, what is the matter with you? These are just people. They're trying to live their lives, and, for crying out loud, they're doing the best they can. What's the matter with you, Lily? I need to be a better and kinder person. And then I realized two things simultaneously. One was that in my world, to be a better person meant being a kinder person. And two, that my ability to observe where I was not being kind meant that I was on the path. The Dalai Lama says about himself, I don't know why people like me so much. It must be because I try to be compassionate, to have bodhicitta, that aspiration of compassion. So even the Dalai Lama does not claim complete success. He claims a dedication to trying. I recently read about a couple who referred to themselves as two self-centered New Yorkers. We're allowed to say that down here. Who decide, any New Yorkers here? Yay! This is how they referred to themselves in the thing that I read. And they decided to create a 12-step program to see if they could learn to open their hearts to be kinder, more empathetic people. And their goal was to do these 12 steps of practice for 1 year and then assess. And the outcome is a website that's devoted to sharing how and what they learned. And here's just a few of the tools that they come up with. Number one, don't just stand there. They talk about bystander apathy. It's really common. Sometimes strangers who need help are right in front of us, and we just turn away or walk away. There are sometimes it's something serious where someone really needs help, and sometimes it's just simple eye contact and a smile that can stop them in their tracks and turn their situation around completely. Forgive and forget. This is an ingoing and an outbound. They practiced self-forgiveness by opening up and talking about things that they thought they hadn't handled very well in the past. And then they faced somebody who had hurt them in the past and practiced forgiveness with them. I think that's part of a lot of 12-step programs, but it was part of their program. Practice kindness. They left wallets all over New York City with money in them and a little note saying, could you please try and do something nice for somebody today? Well, maybe we're not all in a position to do that, but we are all in a position to just be nice. I started thinking about telephone solicitations. I don't know how many calls we get a day. It's just, now we just pick up the phone, don't know the number, never mind. And, don't even answer it half the time. My inbox is, I haven't even listened to it for months now. But I did develop a practice of when I answered my phone and realized that it was just another solicitation, to say, Thanks so much for calling. I'm not interested in anything that you're selling, but I hope you have a really great day. Bye-bye, and hanging up, which, doesn't take up too much of my time, and I think is a pretty big improvement over not interested, bang, which is, kind of how we get after the 177th call, right? Another thing they talked about was walking in another person's shoes. Thanks for that song. That was perfect. It's really easy to judge without knowing all the details. And sometimes the details aren't just about, gosh, what's it like to live on that reservation? Or what's it like to, live in that bad place? Or what's it like to be ill? Or it's not necessarily just living in the shoes of their circumstance, but also living in the shoes of their mental state. Because we do not know what somebody has come to this world with, what they have to deal with, what the internal mechanisms are. We don't know that when they're sort of going, yeah, okay, well, have a great day. Yeah, I got to get on to the next client here, whatever, and doing the duty of their everyday affairs, that inside they're falling apart because they feel like they can't handle something, or they feel not good enough, or whatever the case may be. So it's walking in someone else's shoes wholly and completely, enough to have compassion, not enough to take on their stuff. I have a friend named Les who recently posted on Facebook. It was his son's 16th birthday, and he was kind of writing a global letter. And he gave me permission to share this. So his son Mason was actually born Macy. And by the time he was 12 or 13, he knew that he identified as male. And he has had, since then, all the support that he's needed to go through the changes that he's chosen to make. So in this letter, Les, first he writes about the birth experience and what it meant to catch Macy and cut the cord. But then he says, life is interesting. If someone had told me then I would be calling him my son at 16, I don't think I would have believed them. And yet here I am, celebrating my son. My practice has been unconditional love, and I think he knows I always love and accept him for who he is in every moment. And just in case he forgets, he can always look back here and read this. And he's a great human being. Today, he bought himself a snack in the subway station before lunch, and then he ran into a homeless gentleman, so he gave him his snack. And someone saw him do it and went and gave the same homeless gentleman their coffee that they had just purchased. And I'd always wondered if the small acts of kindness really make a difference, and I see now that they do, and I see it in Mason. Kindness and love are more of what this world needs. Celebrate the people in your life for who they are, not for who you want them to be. That's all anybody wants in this world, is unconditional love. I think there's a lot in that story. But I also think it's so wonderful that this young man has been brought up into a community that fosters love and acceptance and kindness. And it shows in how he responded to a homeless person. It's the pebble in the pond, and those ripples really do reach the shore. To live in Metta, in loving kindness, requires us to go out on a limb. We have to let go of fear and learn to love and accept ourselves to truly offer non-judgment and compassion to others. And we have to learn to see the divine in all of God's creation. And this doesn't mean that we forsake discernment. And, oh, I love y'all, and whatever you do, and don't worry, it's just fine. Sure, run over my foot. I'm good with it. Doesn't mean that. My husband explains it in this way. He says, I have made it a lifetime practice to be kind to people and to hope that they are able to participate. If they're not, I'll do whatever I need to protect myself from their choices, but I won't let them stop me from being kind to the next person. Recently, by way of example, he was selling a vehicle, and he made an arrangement with someone we know to pay X amount, and it was not a very big amount, per month. And he let them take the car right away. But there was a very explicit contract. If a payment was late, there was a $50 late fee, and which was 1/5 of. Sorry, I got my math wrong, but a sizable late fee compared to what they had to pay in the first place. And if they missed a payment altogether, we would reclaim the car. Well, they had 3 late payments in a row, and then they missed a payment, and we went and got the car, and there was no recriminations or anything. It was just, here's the contract, didn't happen, sorry about that, better luck next time, drove the car away. And a short while later, he made exactly the same arrangement with a young girl, and she now owns a car that she loves, and everything worked out beautifully. It's just a great example of moving forward and doing what you know is right and standing in your integrity with your beliefs and not freaking out every time somebody doesn't do what you think that they should do. And there's one more thing I'd like to share with you. Recently at our nature retreat, we had this group of young people from LA, and they were so LA. It was actually fun. They were so young people, and they were so LA. Anyway, I recall, the young man who made the booking, he seemed a little distant, and I didn't feel a sort of instant connection with him as I do with some of the guests. And after they left, I sent a message saying, thanks for choosing the Domes, and I figured that would be the end of it. But he wrote back and said, thank you, I learned a lot on this trip. Now, at this point, normally I would have said, cool, hope we see you again. But I was prompted to ask if he'd like to share with me what he had learned. And he poured his heart out. It was such a beautiful letter that he wrote. He was candid about his self-appraisal and how the trip had changed, how he was seeing himself, and he was able to see how sometimes his thoughts were a bit toxic. And he wanted to make some personal changes that he thought would make him a kinder and more loving person. And it was honest, and it was moving. And at the end he wrote, thanks for asking and listening. To be the best version of myself, I have to see the ways I'm hurting myself. And in this trip, I've seen that. It's time to heal myself and the people around me. And I believe through love that it can be done. Well, we shared back and forth a little bit more, and I really feel we were both enlivened by the communication, by the connection. And it started with a really simple question. Would you care to share what you're thinking? And I realized afterwards, in a simple way, I had exercised loving kindness. A few weeks ago, Bram was talking about staying away from social media because he found it very toxic with all the negativity and the things that people write. And I know we've all witnessed that. I sure get that. But when I was living in Costa Rica, social media was actually the only way that I had to stay in contact with particularly my children and friends and family. So I made a decision that I would only post things that were kind or uplifting, informative in some positive way, or sometimes funny. I couldn't ditch funny, as long as it wasn't mean. And my observation since that time has been that, I don't know if my feed just retrained itself, but I don't get negative stuff. I just don't. Is it what I'm putting out? Is it what gets filtered through the system and sent back to me? I don't know how it works exactly, but I just don't get negative stuff anymore. So what I have are a lot of opportunities to give compassion and condolence when somebody's had a loss, or to share that sort of thing. I was heartfelt comments and responses from people after our Copernicus passed away. It can be a lovely opportunity to learn new things and to share open-hearted compassion and kindness with other people. And every once in a while, I will see something. I don't go in like the big river very often, but every once in a while, if I do see something negative, I mostly don't respond, but once in a while I'm prompted to just offer another way of looking at it. And I like to think that that just goes out there and maybe changes the ripple in the pond just a little bit. We can use the tools that are available to us, and we can live in metta out loud. And I'll leave you with one quote by Kenneth George Mills. I think he said it best. Why don't you hang up your belief as a receiver and start being the message? So I invite you to take a pause and a rest from all those words and take a deep breath and know that if there is one force field of realignment in this cosmos, one thing, one mind, one consciousness, one power for good, the power is love, and love is kindness. And we are that love and that kindness as it flows and filters through every single aspect of ourselves, of our lives, of our circumstance, of the people around us, and of every living thing. I know that as I breathe this essence of love, this essence of kindness. And as I exhale in consciousness and in intention, I exhale this consciousness of love and of kindness. And so this is the gift that I am given, and this is the gift that I can give as I move about this world with compassion and grace and love and kindness, where we greet each other face to face and eye to eye and say, I see you. I know you as I know myself. I love you as I love myself. You are love and compassion, and here we meet. I know that this is the truth of being. I know this is the truth of who we are. And I know that if we, even for a moment each day, pay attention to that knowledge, that is the change that will create it all, the entire sea of kindness that everybody gets to swim in. So I release these words into the law, knowing that this idea, others like it, and so much more are already done in the mind of the One. And it is simply a matter of stepping up to the recognition, seeing it, accepting it, saying, I do, and so it is. Thank you.